Hello everyone, so my name is Yaul Hakmani, and in this lecture I'm going to give you an overview of the different types of literature review that we have, and I prepared a classification, of course, based on review of literature. So I'm going to present that classification of literature reviews and also the differences between the different types of literature reviews. And then we will learn a bit about when to use what type of literature review and when to do a literature review, when not to do a literature review, the association between number of studies in all literature review and potential contribution in all literature review. And then in the end, a little bit of what we can do a literature review. So let's move on. So first, why we do literature reviews. In recent years, more or less in all fields, there are lots of studies being published. And often many disciplines are nowadays fragmented and multidisciplinary. So because of that, it has become really difficult for a researcher to keep track of all the studies that has been published, all the developments that has been going on. So because of that, it is really a good opportunity to synthesize the literature review, to bring all these things under one umbrella, okay? Or maybe not all of it, the most impactful ones or the most relevant ones under one umbrella, and see the contribution of all these studies. And this is why actually I think particularly this is very important for the PhD candidates. When I did my first literature review, which was a bibliometric review, by the way, and I did it on port competitiveness. So my PhD was about port competition and port competitiveness. So when I did the literature review, from the mapping of the cluster, I could see actually all the different topics within the large umbrella of port competitiveness and what is going on, who is doing what type of methods are used. So it gives you a great overview of the whole topic. And in the end, I realized that actually the other three empirical papers that I did, they fall into different clusters of my literature review. So it was really easy for me to kind of associate, kind of make a story of the 3 or 4 papers that I had in my PhD thesis. This is why I actually think this is a great opportunity for the PhD students, especially who are in their first years or just starting, to do a literature review, and you can see what's going on in the field, what journals you should read, what studies you should read, who are the top authors, So you will get an idea of the whole field, how different clusters, different research teams within the field are related to each other. So that's why I think literature review is actually really great opportunity for PhD students to understand what they're doing better. And related to that, so as I said, in the end, your goal of the literature review will be to synthesize the impactful findings. You will find the most cited articles. You'll find the most impactful studies in terms of most cited ones in the recent years, which were coupled together, which studies were cited together, and if there are some conflicting findings. So all these things you will actually find out in a literature review, and also the development over time on that field or on the topic. So this will actually help you a lot to get an overview of your research topic and research idea. And in the end, these literature reviews provide future research directions. So in my thesis, actually, the first paper was the literature review, and then the future research directions that I found in the literature review are actually the ones which I addressed later in my 3 empirical papers. Or sometimes I proposed actually more future research directions, but the 3 that I addressed in empirical ones were common with that. So it was a great fit for me actually. So it may be the case for you, may not be the case for you, but in an overall, whether you put your literature review in your PhD thesis or not, in an overall, actually, it's a great opportunity. Now, whenever I'm starting to look into a new topic or new domain, the first thing I do a bibliometric literature review, and I get to see what's going on, what are the state of the art, and I introduce myself with that. And then diving deep becomes quite easier for me. So anyway, so that's why I recommend doing everyone a literature review in the early stages of their career, or when you are looking into a new topic or a new field. So now, based on a literature review of papers that guides literature review, I made a classification of literature reviews. So broadly, we can say that literature reviews are 2 types: systematic, non-systematic. Within the non-systematic category, I would say that we have the traditional or narrative reviews and critical and integrative reviews. The systematic side, I would say that we have the systematic literature reviews, bibliometric literature reviews, and meta-analysis reviews. And as you know, in this course, our focus will be on bibliometric literature reviews, right? And sometimes we actually can combine different types of literature reviews, which we call hybrid reviews. This is something you will see that in the bibliometric literature reviews that we teach you in this course are actually the combination of systematic and bibliometric reviews. So we actually combine both of them, and that actually strengthens the contribution of the study, or it makes it quite rich compared to like using only one type of literature review. So that is something you will see over the next few days. Okay, so what we actually will be doing is more or less a hybrid literature review. And here, I mentioned and focus on these main 5 types, but there are more which are also kind of overlapping with the categories that I mentioned here. So those are semi-systematic literature reviews, scoping literature reviews, state of the review. So those actually have a lot of kind of overlapping concepts with these 5 ones. Okay. And one more term you will see often is content analysis. Okay, so sometimes some of the literature review studies focus a lot on content analysis. But in my opinion, the content analysis literature reviews are also systematic literature reviews. If you follow a systematic way of collecting data, analyzing data, and reporting the data, then the content analysis you will do, because you will follow a systematic way of doing it, that becomes actually part of the systematic review. Okay. And also in the bibliometric review that we teach here, we also follow a very strict systems of analyzing the content. You will see that in the Ilan's lecture, you have already seen that he was making this literature review matrix. Also, I provided Excel file for that. So you see that we actually start with the literature review matrix, which is a systematic way of analyzing the content. So that's already actually a systematic review approach. Okay. And some people may use NVivo's or some other text analysis software for content analysis. That doesn't matter. As long as you do it in a systematic way, meaningful way, it doesn't matter. Okay. So here I try to kind of differentiate between the main 5 types of literature review that I proposed in the previous slide. So the first one is a traditional or narrative review, which would say that it's a descriptive or summative analysis of published studies. And the focus of this kind of study will be very narrow. Normally, there will be few studies on the topic, and it will try to kind of describe what's happening and try to summarize those few studies published on the topic. Normally, the literature search is non-systematic, and the synthesis is narrative. You more or less explain in a descriptive way what has been done, and you kind of try to make a summary of that. Then the next one is critical or integrative reviews. In these kind of reviews, the aim is to evaluate, criticize, synthesize, and which will lead you to new perspective of theoretical frameworks. Here, it is very important to note down that these types of reviews are very specific. It could be focusing on only one hypothesis, one conceptual framework, one theory. So they're very specific. They might criticize one study. Maybe that is a very impactful study, like maybe that has received thousands of citations, and then you criticize that one, you critically evaluate that one. Or it could be very few studies on a particular hypothesis, particular topic, which were also impactful, and then you kind of try to evaluate that. Normally, these types of reviews are written by very expert professors who has been doing research on a particular field for many years. Okay, and usually these type of reviews also follows a non-systematic search for articles to analyze. Okay, the top professors or like the experts on the field, they will know actually which articles did what, which are the most impactful ones. So they kind of try to evaluate and criticize and synthesize those ones to guide the future of the field. And normally the writing style here will be reflective, conceptual. Okay, then the systematic review is a systematic approach for collecting, analyzing, and synthesizing published studies. And normally they're narrow focus. Okay, so here, as I mentioned earlier already, the focus is that we have to have a system of collecting data, analyzing data, and synthesizing data. or synthesizing studies. Okay, and here the focus is normally narrow, but it could be a little bit broader. But here, one thing is that you have to remember how many articles you can handle. You can very deeply read and code, let's say 100 articles. If you are 2-3 authors, maybe 200, maximum 300 articles. But if you want to analyze more than 200 or 300 articles, then it will be really difficult for you. Okay, so normally the focus will be narrow, and then you will have like 50 to 100 articles, something like that. But if you make your focus broader, then you will have like hundreds of articles, few hundreds of articles, and then it will be really difficult for you to analyze all these articles and in a systematic way, particularly if you are only one author working on the paper. Okay, and here the search will be very systematic and comprehensive. Okay, and the synthesis will be usually narratives with tables and figure. And here is our main focus, the bibliometric literature reviews. Here we analyze citations and keywords using statistical and network analysis methods, which we will be learning in detail in the upcoming lectures. And usually the bibliometric is very useful when you want to analyze a broader topic, broader field, because with the citation analysis and bibliometric tools, we can actually analyze hundreds or thousands of studies even. Okay. But here also, the literature search is very systematic and it is very comprehensive. Okay, so actually, bibliometric review is actually a type of systematic review. But here, some of the focus is on the citations and keyword search. And here, normally the synthesis will be again in the end, figures and tables with narratives. But here, one more thing is that, in my opinion, bibliometrics are better than systematic reviews. In a way that bibliometric is more objective, reproducible, and transparent, So let's say you find, 500 articles on a field or topic. Then you find the most bibliographically coupled studies, the most 50 bibliographically coupled studies that make up the clusters in your study. Then you analyze only in these 50 studies in detail. You don't have to do the detailed analysis of all these 500 studies. So that's how it is actually objective, transparent, and reproducible, and it makes your life easy. And which is also, I should say that it is important if you're PhD students to make your life to some extent easy, because we have seen some PhD candidates who wanted to analyze 2,000 articles using a systematic way, using this coding. And then he or she has spent, 2 years, and then after 2 years on a literature review, and then got frustrated and actually then dropped out from the PhD. So we really don't want to do that. You want to make a kind of trade-off between the work the time you have, the effort you have to put, and the output you will generate. So from that perspective, I really think bibliometric is a good option, good opportunity, or good alternative for the PhD candidates, which still requires a lot of work. The softwares we are going to play with, they are not going to really do anything. They just make some manual work easier. But in the end, you still have to read a lot of studies and make sense of them. All the figures and tables that the bibliometric softwares generate, you have to make the sense out of it, right? So anyway, that's why I think these are some reasons why I believe bibliometric is more useful, especially for early career researchers. So the next one is the meta-analysis reviews. And in meta-analysis, what we analyze is that we analyze the correlations and regression coefficients using quantitative methods. They're very specific. Normally, they test one hypothesis, the relationship between two variables or something like that, and you collect data on these two relationships from all the published studies, empirically published studies. And then you actually try to, again, make some analysis out of it to get a kind of overall level. So some found there's a positive effect, some found there's a negative effect. So you look into the effect sizes actually, and then in the end, you want to kind of generalize what would be the true effect size. Okay. And here also the search will be systematic and very comprehensive. And the synthesis will be figures and tables with narratives. Then hybrid review, you can combine any two or more literature review approach from here. Okay. So normally one can do systematic, bibliometric, and meta-analysis in the same study, which I do not recommend. I recommend only combining bibliometric and systematic. Okay, and the traditional ones, please don't go for that. I don't think they are easy to publish. At least in these days, in the very early days before 2000, they were more or less okay to publish. And the critical ones, they are published often, but they are written always by the experts. So please don't go for that one. So if you're a young scholar like me, go for systematic, bibliometric, or meta-analysis. Okay, and better approach is combine them as we do in the bibliometric literature review. So combine the bibliometric and systematic reviews. Okay.